They told me the tower would be the quietest place I'd ever know. No cell signal, no roads, just a winding trail through black pine that nobody used unless they had to. 120 feet above the forest floor, alone with the wind and the sound of my own breathing. It was exactly what I needed. Or at least that's what I told myself. A season away from people, away from the noise, the news, the endless static of city life. Just me, the trees, and the endless watch for the thin curl of smoke that would mean fire. The first night was uneventful, the kind of silence you only notice when you can hear your own heartbeat. The second night was different. It started with a light, far out in the darkness, deep in the tree line. Not the orange of a campfire, not the white of a flashlight. This was something else, too high in the air to belong to a hiker, too steady to be a drone. I watched it for a long time, so long I don't even remember breathing. And then, without warning, it blinked out. That's when I saw the shape. It wasn't a bird, it wasn't a plane. It was something standing in the air, and I swear it was looking right at me. I haven't told anyone this before, not my friends, not my family, and definitely not the rangers who hired me. You seem like the kind of person who's seen strange things too, or at least the kind who won't laugh when I tell you. I'm not here to convince you I'm sane. I'm here because I need to get this out of my head before it eats me alive. I took that job in the remote fire lookout tower because I thought it would save me. I was burned out. My phone never stopped buzzing, even when I turned it off. My apartment walls felt like they were closing in, and every conversation I had with another human being felt rehearsed. The tower was supposed to be my way out of a cabin in the woods, high above the treetops, with no signal, no neighbors, no obligations except to scan for smoke and log the weather. It sounded peaceful. It sounded like freedom. The thing about isolation is, it doesn't feel the way you think it will. At first, it's almost intoxicating. You wake up to the sound of wind combing through the pines, the morning mist curling around the base of the tower like it's hiding you from the rest of the world. You step outside with your coffee, and there's nothing but the smell of cold wood and the hum of silence. No sirens, no voices, no one. But silence changes. The longer you listen to it, the more you start hearing things you're not sure were there before. Little cracks and thumps in the wood. A faint creak that could be the wind, except it only happens at night. One night I swore I heard footsteps on the stairs, slow and deliberate, pausing between each step. I told myself it was an animal. Raccoons climb, right? But then the sound stopped right outside my door and didn't move for what felt like hours. You have to understand, in that tower, you're the only living thing for miles. You can see the tree line stretching out forever, the rolling black of the forest swallowing everything in every direction. If something's out there, you'll see it. That's what I thought. But whatever was moving around my tower that night didn't want to be seen. It stayed just out of sight, like it knew the edges of my vision. That was the first night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, every light off, listening for the smallest noise. My ears felt sharper than they'd ever been, like I was waiting for a voice to come through the walls. And in a way, it did. Around 3 in the morning, just when my eyes had adjusted to the black, I heard whispering. Not from below the tower, from inside it. It was faint, like someone talking through cupped hands from the corner of the room. I couldn't make out the words, just the rhythm of them in a steady, breathy stream. I wanted to turn on the light, but something deep in my chest told me not to. That if I moved, the voice would know I was listening. So I just sat there, pretending to be asleep. The next morning, the place looked the same. The journal where I logged weather patterns was still on the desk. My boots were by the door. The only thing out of place was the chair by the window. I never move it. It's perfectly angled to see the ridgeline. But that morning, it was turned inward, facing the room, facing me. I should have left right then, I should have called it in and told them I wasn't cut out for it. But I told myself I was imagining it, that the chair had been that way the whole time and I just didn't notice. That's what you do out there. You rationalize until the truth feels like a bad dream. And I guess that's why I'm telling you this. Because I need someone to believe me when I say it wasn't just the chair. It wasn't just the whispering. Things got worse. Much worse. I'm not asking you to believe every detail. I just need you to hear them. Because there's something about that tower, something about the forest it sits in, that isn't right. I've read the local rumors since people talking about strange lights, about hikers who go missing and are found miles from where they should be, with no memory of walking. Some of them talk about an unexplained presence, something that can step into your dreams and make you do things without realizing it. Promise me you won't try to find it. I know how tempting that sounds. A cabin in the woods, cut off from the world, surrounded by untouched nature. But I can tell you now, peace isn't what's waiting for you there. If you hear the whispers, it's already too late. And if you ever see a light too high in the trees to belong to a person, don't look at it for too long. The fire lookout tower was older than I expected. When they dropped me off, I was honestly surprised it was still standing. You could see the age in every warped plank and faded bolt. The wood was gray and splintered from decades of storms, leaning just slightly as though it had been trying to bow out of the wind for years. The steps groaned under my boots as I climbed, each one flexing a little more than I would have liked. By the time I reached the top platform, my calves were burning not from the climb, but from the gnawing thought that this thing had no right to still be upright. The cabin itself was a single square room perched on stilts, above the endless forest. Big glass windows wrapped around three sides, offering a panoramic view of the ridgelines and valleys below. It should have felt freeing. Instead, it felt exposed. From up there, you could see forever, but it also meant forever could see you. I tried to tell myself that was just paranoia, but the sensation of being watched started before I'd even unpacked my bag. Inside, it was sparse. One narrow bed pressed against the far wall, a desk with a radio and weather log, a metal chair angled toward the window, a small propane stove, and shelves lined with chipped enamel mugs and dusty canned food. The place smelled faintly of metal and damp wood, like rain that had seeped in years ago and never fully left. The air was cooler than outside, almost as if the cabin was holding on to a cold that didn't belong to the season. The first night I spent there, I noticed something strange. Just before dusk, as I was filling out my weather report, the forest went silent, completely. One moment, the trees were alive with the soft trill of birds and the occasional buzz of insects. The next, nothing, not even the wind. It was like the world had been muted. I froze with my pen halfway to the paper, listening. My heart started to thump in the quiet, loud enough that I swore it would echo off the walls. I waited for the sound to come back, but it didn't. It stayed that way until the sun dipped fully behind the mountains. Only then did a single sound return, a low, distant creak, like a rope being pulled taut somewhere in the trees. It wasn't close, not then, but it was there. The locals hadn't told me much before I came out. The ranger who gave me the job just smiled a little too long. When I asked about previous lookout operators, he handed me a ring of keys, pointed to the access road, and told me to keep my radio charged just in case. It was only after I'd been up there a few days that I learned about the rumors. On my fourth night, I was trying to get a signal on my phone from the west-facing window, even though I knew there was no signal. I kept trying, like some part of me thought I'd catch a scrap of connection if I stood in the right spot. That's when I noticed movement in the glass, not in the forest, in the reflection. Behind me, the cabin was still and empty, lit only by the faint glow of the propane lamp on the desk. But in the reflection, for just a second, I thought I saw something standing in the far corner, a tall, thin figure, almost part of the shadows. When I spun around, there was nothing. The air, though the air felt heavier, like the cabin had inhaled and was holding its breath. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I shut my eyes, I thought I heard a new noise. A faint knock on the underside of the floorboards, the metallic shift of the stovepipe. At one point, I heard the sound of paper being turned slowly, deliberate, even though my logbook was shut. In the morning, I found the logbook open on my desk, not to a page I had written, but to one dated 10 years earlier. The handwriting was messy, rushed, and the entry was short. If you hear it on the stairs, don't move, don't breathe, wait until it leaves. That day, I decided to explore a little, hoping maybe I'd find the source of the strange noises. The tower was surrounded by miles of dense pine, the kind of forest that swallows sound. About 50 yards out, I found the remnants of some old wooden posts arranged in a rough circle, their tops blackened like they'd been burned. In the center of the circle was a flat stone, almost perfectly smooth, like it had been polished by hand. There were symbols carved into it, not letters, not anything I recognized. When I got back to the tower, the clock on the wall had stopped. Not when I'd left. I was sure I'd heard its steady ticking as I walked out, but while I was gone, the hands were frozen at 2:37. When I tried to wind it, the gears inside wouldn't move, as if they'd been fused together. That night, the silence came earlier. This time, it didn't wait until dusk. I was making coffee when the forest just turned off again. My breath sounded too loud in the stillness. I walked to the window and scanned the tree line. The sun was still high enough to burn through the mist, but the trees looked darker. Their shadows stretched too long for the hour. That's when I saw something pale between the trunks. Too far to make out details, but tall, motionless, watching. I blinked, and it was gone. But the silence stayed. It's hard to explain what that does to you after a few days. The lack of sound feels like pressure, like you're underwater. You start listening for things you don't want to hear. The creak of wood when there's no wind. The faint rustle of fabric when you're alone. The sigh of something settling that isn't the cabin. And through it all, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there knew me now. By the end of my first week in the tower, the stillness that had once felt like a welcome escape began to take on a different weight. Something heavier, pressing, and wrong. The air seemed thicker, as though the forest was holding its breath. At night, that stillness broke. The first incident was subtle, a single, soft knock against the base of the tower, just after midnight. I told myself it was the wind shifting the wood, or maybe a branch tapping in the breeze. But when I leaned out into the cold darkness, the air was completely still. Not a leaf moved. Not a sound, except for the faint echo of that knock replaying. In my head, the second night, it came again. Only this time, it was higher up, closer to the first set of stairs. 3 distinct knocks. Not hurried, not tentative, just deliberate. I grabbed my flashlight, swept it through the forest below, and found nothing but skeletal trees and deep blackness between them. I locked the trap door above the stairwell after that. Not that it made much difference. 2 nights later, I woke to the creak of that same trap door shifting against its hinges. I had locked it. I remembered turning the latch, pressing my palm against the cold metal to be sure it was secure. But there it was, swaying gently in the dim light of my lantern, as though it had been left ajar for hours. My breath came slow, shallow, as I descended the stairs. Nothing. No footprints in the dust, no signs of forced entry. The latch wasn't broken, it was simply unhooked. By the end of the second week, the knocks had become routine. Sometimes they came from the far side of the tower, sometimes directly beneath the floorboards. Always at night. Always when I was just about to drift off. But then came the whispers. At first, I thought it was wind curling through the cracks in the wood, carrying half-formed phrases from my imagination. But one night, the words became clear, so clear they jolted me upright. They said my name, not once, over and over, whispered, in a voice so close it could have been inches from my ear. I spun in every direction, my flashlight cutting across the room, and saw nothing but my reflection in the dark glass of the observation windows. My heart was hammering, but the forest outside looked the same as it always did, silent, indifferent. And yet there was movement. In the reflection, behind me, something long and thin seemed to drift across the room. I turned, and of course, there was nothing. After that, sleep became impossible. I'd hear the furniture shift in the night, the desk chair scraping slowly across the floor, the old metal cot groaning as if someone had sat down on it. But when I turned my head toward the sound, the chair would be perfectly still, the cot untouched. The only proof that anything had happened came in the mornings, when I'd find small, deliberate changes. The lantern moved to the opposite corner of the room. The map I'd been using folded neatly in half, my radio dial tuned to a frequency I'd never touched. I told myself I'd imagined it, that I was overtired, but deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't random. Someone, or something, was in the tower with me. It was patient. I watched it, and the more I tried to ignore it, the closer it seemed to get. It was some time after my third week in the lookout tower that I stopped thinking of the disturbances as random. They had a rhythm to them, a progression, as though something was following a schedule, only it understood. And then, one night, I found the reason. It started with a sound I hadn't heard before, not knocking, not whispers. It was a hollow, scraping noise, like something dragging across dry wood. It came from beneath me, far under the trapdoor, deeper than the base platform. At first, I thought maybe an animal had gotten inside. But then the sound stopped, and a faint metallic clink echoed up through the boards. The next day, I searched. I checked the storage space below the observation deck, running my hands over every wall. That's when I found it. One plank, warped and slightly lifted at the edge, as if something had pushed up from underneath. I wedged my fingers in, pried it up, and a wave of stale, earthy air hit me cold and damp, like the inside of a root cellar that hadn't been opened in decades. There was a compartment no bigger than a suitcase. Inside was a leather-bound journal, stiff with age, its cover darkened by time and water stains. The moment I touched it, the faintest breath of air rose from the compartment, and I swear, it whispered too low for me to catch the words, but unmistakably human. The journal belonged to someone named Harlan Finch, who, according to the first entry, had worked in this same tower in 1968. The handwriting was cramped, jittery, and uneven, like he'd been writing in the dark. At first, the entries were mundane: weather notes, patrol logs, complaints about supply runs being late. But then, midway through the third week, his tone shifted. He wrote about knocks at night, whispers calling his name, the exact things I'd been experiencing. He described seeing movement in the reflection of the glass, always behind him, never in front. The last coherent entry chilled me more than anything else I'd read. It's not in the forest, it's in the tower. It comes when you're almost asleep, and it learns you. It learns your shape, your breathing. It learns how to sound like you. After that, the handwriting dissolved into frantic scrawls, pages and pages of repeated phrases. It's almost me, and don't turn around, written so forcefully the paper tore in places. But the very last page wasn't in handwriting at all. It was carved deep, uneven gouges in the paper itself, like someone had taken a knife to it. The message was just for words. You can't leave now. That night, I couldn't stop hearing the words in my head. They came between every creak of the wood, every sigh of the wind against the glass, and then they came from my own voice. I was sitting on the cot, staring at the lantern flame, when behind me, clear as anything, I heard myself say, "You can't leave now." My throat closed, my skin prickled, and I turned slowly, so slowly toward the sound, and there I was, standing in the far corner of the room. It had my face, my clothes, the same tired slump in my shoulders. But its eyes weren't right. They were too still, too empty, like they weren't eyes at all, but dark, polished glass. It smiled my smile, but stretched just a little too far, and whispered, in my voice, almost me. I think I blacked out after that. When I woke up, it was morning. The cot was back where it belonged, the lantern in its usual place. The journal was gone, and every single window in the tower was covered from the outside, with something that looked like blackened paper blocking the view in every direction. I wasn't alone anymore. I could feel it. I still feel it now. I woke up with sunlight spilling through a single tear in whatever was covering the windows. It was the first light I'd seen in I don't know how long. My sense of time had dissolved. The clock on the wall was frozen at 3:17, but the shadows outside shifted as though hours were passing in minutes. I told myself I needed to leave. I didn't care if it meant abandoning the post, if it meant losing my job, if it meant walking through miles of forest without supplies. I just couldn't stay in that tower another night. The trapdoor was heavier than it had ever been, as if something below was holding it shut. I forced it open, the wood groaning like a wounded animal, and began the climb down. My boots hit the ground, and for a moment, I felt relief. The air smelled of pine and damp soil, and the sunlight seemed real. But the first step I took into the trees brought me face to face with the tower again. I froze. I hadn't turned around, I was certain, but there it was, right in front of me. I tried again, picking a direction and walking fast, ignoring the branches that whipped against my face. The forest closed in, the ground sloped, the air grew colder, and then the clearing appeared again, the tower waiting at its center. By the fifth attempt, I wasn't surprised anymore. I just stood there, staring at the structure, wondering if it was even wood and metal anymore, or something else, wearing the tower's shape like what I'd seen wearing mine. Night came fast, too fast. One moment it was late afternoon, the next, the sky was an inky sheet with no stars. I went back inside because I didn't know what else to do. The door shut behind me without me touching it. The air inside was different now, thicker, almost wet, like the inside of a lung. Every sound was muffled, except for a slow, steady breathing that didn't match mine. I could hear it coming from all around, through the walls, through the floorboards. I sat on the cot, too tired to think. Maybe I'm too tired to care. The breathing grew closer. I didn't look up, not even when I felt it on the back of my neck, warm and damp. A voice not mine this time spoke softly, almost kindly. You're ready now, and I understood. I didn't need to leave. I didn't need the forest or the outside world. I needed to be here. I needed to watch, the same way it had been watching me. The windows were still covered, but in my mind, I could see the forest stretching out forever, every path bending back here. I could feel its shape now, the way it circled and looped, drawing everything inward, drawing them to me. Somewhere outside, I heard footsteps on the stairs, slow, patient, coming up to meet me. I think I'll let them in. I guess this is the part where I'm supposed to warn you. Or maybe it's the part where I tell you it's already too late. I haven't been able to sleep since that night, not really. My eyes close, but I don't drift away. Instead, I stay, in that same half place, where the air is heavy and the silence isn't silence at all. I hear the breathing every night, no matter where I am. I can be in a motel 3 states away, in the middle of a busy street, even in the company of other people, and I'll still hear it. That slow, measured inhale and exhale, like it's right behind me. I've told myself it's just in my head. Maybe I stayed out there too long, that the isolation did something to me. You've heard of cabin fever, right? People lose themselves when they're cut off from the world. That's the easy answer, the comforting one. But if it's only in my head, explain this. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm standing, not in my bed, not even in my house, just standing somewhere else entirely. One time, I was in my kitchen, staring out the back window into the dark. Another time, I was in the middle of the road outside my apartment. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember coming back. And in those moments, there's no panic, no confusion, just a deep, calm certainty that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I think about the tower more than I want to. Not just the nights inside it, but the way the forest bent around it, folding in on itself like a paper trap. I keep wondering if it's still out there, or if the place I found only exists when it wants to. You seem like someone who's seen strange things before, someone who knows better than to go looking for answers. That's why I'm telling you this, not to invite you in, but to keep you out. If you ever come across that place, you won't mistake it for anything else. You'll know right away. The trees will be too still. The air will feel too thick. And if you walk toward it, you'll feel like you're being watched before you even see the tower. Don't stay. I mean it. Not even for a night. Not even to prove to yourself. It's all just a story. Because the thing is, you won't leave. You'll think you're walking away, but the path will bend back, and you'll find yourself standing at the base of those stairs again. You'll hear the wind, but it won't be wind, it'll be breathing. And if you're not careful, if you hesitate for even a second, you'll hear that same voice I did, and you'll answer it. I used to think the tower was a place. Now I'm not so sure. I think it's a role, a duty, and once it chooses you, you don't get to quit. I wasn't the first. I won't be the last. And someday, when I'm gone, it'll call someone else up those stairs. Maybe that'll be years from now. Maybe it'll be tonight. So if you ever find yourself out in the woods, far from the noise of the world, and you see a light in the distance, don't go toward it, even if it looks warm. Even if you think you're lost, and it's the only sign of life for miles. Especially then, because if you walk up those stairs, you won't be walking back down. If you've ever been alone, really alone, you know what I'm talking about. That moment when the quiet feels too heavy, when you catch yourself holding your breath just to hear better. Maybe it's footsteps in the hallway. Maybe it's the faint click of a door latch, even though you locked it yourself. Or maybe it's just breathing. If you've ever felt that, I want to know. Tell me. Not because I can help you. God knows I can't help myself, but because sometimes sharing it is the only way to make it feel less real. Drop your story below. I read them all, every single one, and maybe if we piece them together, we'll start to see the pattern. Just a word of warning. Writing it down won't make it go away. In fact, it might make it sharper. Sometimes when I talk about the tower, I swear I can hear it answering back. So if you're brave enough, tell me what you've heard. Tell me where you were. Tell me if you saw anything. And whatever you do, don't listen to the next story alone.